So we are going to start this world premiere conference about the adaptive S&OP book from the Demand-Driven Institute. Bonjour Carole, hello Dick, hello Chad. Welcome to Paris. Dick, we are very honored to have you with us as co-author of this new and important book about S&OP, since your book that started the S&OP adventure are now iconic. Carole and Chad, we are so happy to have you with us. We trust that this new DDI book is definitely going to change the world of manufacturing, thanks to the engagement of CEOs. More than 260 people registered for this conference. They are going to listen to you and to your answers to the questions of the first consulting, training, and software companies, DDI affiliates and partners of French-speaking Association of Supply Chain Manager, IFRSCM, who started DDMRP in France in 2013 with you. Carole, the electronic floor is yours.
Merci, Caroline, and bonjour to everybody that's attending. It is really my great honor that we are here today. We are very happy to make a very short presentation about a book that took us about 3 years to write. We're very excited to have as the lead author on this book, the father of S&OP, who had this vision of what sales and operations planning should be, and that now with Demand Driven, we have that opportunity to restore that promise of sales and operations planning. So this has been a great honor for me to work with the father of S&OP, Dick, I've known for, I won't snitch, Dick, how many years, and Chad, my longtime co-author and business partner. So I had the opportunity to have brilliant men on both sides of me as we worked through the last 3 years of putting this book together. So I'm going to turn it over to Dick, and Dick's going to give us a little background on S&OP and how this process worked and what his vision was for S&OP and what we're going to do. And then we'll turn the greatest part of the presentation over to Chad. So Dick, it's up to you.
Thanks, Carole. It's a pleasure to be here. We developed sales and operations planning back in 1984. That's 36 years ago. And why did we do it? Well, there was the lack of a formal planning process in manufacturing. And I'd like to thank Carole and Chad for coaxing me out of retirement. This 3 years has been quite eventful, and we finally have another book. So I never thought I'd write another book, but thanks to Carole and Chad, we have one. And I think now we've elevated S&OP to a level well beyond what I envisioned in '84. We chose the term adaptive because it best describes what S&OP has now become. Well, what's the background? Well, the original objective was to try to align assets, capabilities, and activities with business projections and direction. There wasn't a process that really did that. Some people did it well, but there was nothing in literature that described what we now understand as a necessary sales and operations planning process. Companies operated with a silo mentality. That's why we created it. And we needed a way of having cross-functional planning with information, digital information, and then the documented assumptions behind the data. Of course, with any new activity, there was initial reluctance, and it took a while to really get it going. It finally started catching on in the 1990s, and that's because we finally had some software. Initially, we had to use just Excel spreadsheets, but the interest really didn't explode until the year 2000. And it became something that many or most companies were trying to implement. And even though some companies had some pretty good success, there were some things standing in the way of it. And of its intended objective. And that's because things just didn't tie and create the right type of activities in support of sales and operations planning. I'm going to let Chad kind of take you through all the things that we've come across or have been a problem with getting in the way of S&OP being a success. Chad, take it away.
Great, thank you, Dick. One of the things that we end here on is a bullet that says what stands in the way of its intended objective. And I think that initially there were other obstacles in the way of performing S&OP at a scalable level. But today we're seeing a changing landscape, and really what's standing in the way of good S&OP, really good command and control of any organization, is the rise of the VUCA world. Now, VUCA is an acronym, and it stands for volatile. And that means that the frequency and severity of disruptions is increasing at a faster and faster rate. And leadership cannot simply say, if something disruptive is going to happen to us, we should do this. They have to be talking when something disruptive is going to happen to us. It is going to happen. We also, we look at the U in VUCA, it means uncertain. It's very difficult. It's increasingly more difficult to understand what is going to happen in the future. And there's always three truths about forecasting, and they've been the truth since the very beginning. And that is, forecasts start out with an inherent level of error. The longer that we tend to forecast out, particularly in the VUCA world, the higher the error rate, and the more detailed we attempt to make the forecast, the higher the error rate as well. These are three truths that have always been there. It's just gasoline on the forecast fire with the VUCA world. The C stands for complex. Complex means that our supply chains, our entities have more connections and interdependencies now than ever, okay? And three effects of complex systems result. One is called elongation, and elongation means that our cumulative lead times have expanded as we've sourced globally, we sell globally, but the problem is our customer tolerance times have shrunk. We also get fragmentation. Fragmentation means that there's so many more nodes and inputs that make it making the effective integration of activities much more difficult to manage. We have more things to integrate at many different stages. And then we get fragility. And fragility is the fact that even small initiating events can have devastating effects. I think we've seen some excellent examples, well, some unfortunate examples in the last 2 years about small things, the lack of availability of small things that create disruption throughout the world. A in VUCA stands for ambiguous. Now, ambiguous doesn't refer to a difficulty in predicting what will happen. What ambiguous means is it's difficult to tell what is happening right now. We have so much data, but yet we're starved for relevant information. And we even see conflicting data that throws our organizations into oscillating behaviors between some that think we should do this versus some that think we should do this. The people that developed our information systems never could have imagined the amount of data we produce on a daily basis. The key here is going to be how we sift through that data, certainly for command and control purposes. Now, what's the net effect of the VUCA world? The net effect is that companies are dying quicker than ever. And this is some research that we've used quite frequently, but the fact of the matter, and remember, this report is before the pandemic, all right? But what they were able to conclude was that companies are failing to adapt to these new circumstances, and they are dying younger. We also see that there's falling confidence in S&OP practices. Once again, this research is from before the pandemic, so I don't think that the picture will improve much, but this is from Laura Cecere, and those of you that know Laura out there, she's a wonderful researcher, just a tremendous researcher, and she has a great way of displaying the data. But here what we see is a comparison between the perceived S&OP effectiveness in 2016 versus just 3 years later, 2019. And what you can see is a dramatically different picture or confidence level that inside of companies about whether the S&OP process is really effective. And once again, this is before the pandemic. And why don't we talk a little bit about where we've gone wrong with S&OP? It's not the fact that S&OP has any bad objective. I mean, you know, good S&OP is not, it's not financial reconciliation and reporting. It is command and control for operational activity. It's merging, blending strategy with operational capability and vice versa, blending operational capability with emerging strategy. But in our conventional schema, we have a disconnect. And on the right-hand side, you can see the conventional schema. You know, we have an S&OP activity. It delivers a forecast to a master production schedule. The master production schedule makes a tactical, kind of a tactical view, and it gives MRP demand through the planning horizon. And then MRP, of course, does its thing and creates orders with date and quantity synchronization. But S&OP really, if you think about it, any forecast usually should be presented as a range. Why? Because there's inherent error. And any good S&OP activity then is about projecting ranges of possibilities. But what we see here is that convention forces the use of a single number that comes out of that S&OP process. Why? Because the MPS and MRP can only accept a single number. And when you have to choose a single number between a range, guess what? The number will be wrong. And that wrong number will propagate all the way down through MRP, meaning we are launching activity, initiating activity. We're committing capacity, capital, space, activity to a number that we know is wrong. And when the number changes, and we all know the number will change, when the number changes, even if it was in the original range, it's still the wrong number and causes massive adjustments. So what we've done is we've put together a new framework for the VUCA world called the demand-driven adaptive enterprise model. And it has 3 components in it. We have adaptive S&OP at the strategic side, and that sends business plan parameters down to our tactical component, which is demand-driven S&OP, which then configures our operational model. And then it's a bidirectional model. So coming back from the demand-driven operating model is our variance analysis. So how has the model performed? So that we can drive configuration changes. And coming back from the tactical side to the strategy side are things like our projections, our innovations, and our strategic recommendations for operational capability. And at each side of the model, there is a market interface. On the operational side, we're interfacing with actual demand, while at the strategic side, we're interfacing with what we call market-driven innovation. Now, everything with the demand-driven adaptive enterprise model and adaptive S&OP, by the way, is based upon the idea of flow, and that flow is the true lever for return on investment. We can demonstrate it using a very simple formula here, is that we see that changes to flow yield changes to cash velocity, which yield changes to return on investment. Flow is the rate at which the system converts material to product that's required by the customer. That's the key thing. It's required by the customer. It will sell through. Cash velocity is the net cash generation dollars minus our truly variable costs minus our period operating expenses. And most people would refer to this, most management accountants would refer to this as contribution margin. And then, of course, this formula is the formula for return on investment. Now, in management accounting, it's very important to understand that flow is what is managed. Cost is the outcome of that management. You do not manage cost. you manage flow and you get a certain cost based upon a period of activity. Flow and cost do have a relationship. Once again, though, it's a certain cost will be produced based upon the flow in a period. So if you manage flow better in a period, guess what? You get better cost performance and control. This formula does not exist. You do not manage changes to costs, do not yield changes to cash velocity. In fact, cost, once again, is an outcome of flow. It was never intended to be a decision driver. It was simply intended to anchor markets and report to regulatory agencies. Now, what's behind flow? Well, there are some keys here. We have some missing links. I think Caroline will appreciate that reference here, because in order to manage flow, we first have to manage variability. Now, variability is defined as the summation of the differences between our plan and what actually happens. And we know, by the way, with our conventional schema, that we're going to have changes, right? When variability goes down, we know that flow goes up. Consequently, or conversely, we know that when variability goes up, flow goes down. Now, it's not just simply managing variability. You don't just start to manage variability. You have to have something else to be able to manage variability, and that is called visibility. All right, now visibility is defined as having the relevant information for decision making. The more visibility to relevant information we have, the less amount of variability we will incur. Consequently, or conversely, if our view of relevant information gets distorted, then variability goes up. So what I'd like to do here is I'd like to share with you, now we're going to start to go into some of the new stuff here. And we're going to really try to understand what this flow equation has, what implications it has, not only for operations, but for tactics and strategy, because really there are three different versions of the flow equation that we can see here. One is at the operational level, one is at the tactical level, and one is at the strategic level. And all of those different levels have different signals, behaviors, and measured results. This is what we refer to as relevant ranges. People that are managing the operational relevant range, the types of signals and behaviors that they're using are different than the signals and behaviors that people are using at the strategic relevant range. But it's important to note that all of these relevant ranges have to be connected together into the model. So what we see here are the relevant ranges for the demand-driven adaptive enterprise model. We see our operational relevant range. We see our adaptive S&OP relevant range that extends out into the future. And then we see our tactical relevant range up at the top, which is what we get is our past cumulative lead time plus our current cumulative lead time. And so you can see the period of overlap there for all of the relevant ranges. Now, how do they connect? Well, here's exactly how they connect. And nobody's ever seen this slide yet to date. This is straight out of the book. What we've done here is we've shown you the connections between the different relevant ranges and how they relate to the flow equation. So you see the input up at the top as actual demand and model configurations, going through to operational visibility to create relevant information there, to control operational variability, and thus to produce operational flow, which then feeds into your tactical visibility, because that's going to tell you how well your operational capability is aligning with the market. And your tactical visibility then is going to take cues from your tactical input from the strategic side, as well as that past performance on the operating model. And then you're going to make changes to the model based upon what the strategy and the operational sides are telling you. That will then yield you tactical flow that then flows into your strategic visibility that says, okay, how has the capability been managed over the last tactical ranges? And then we have other inputs like strategic recommendations and market-driven innovation. That's that market-driven strategy that's coming from leadership. Now, all of this flows through to strategic flow, which would be some sort of cash reconciliation within a defined period, and then it yields you your return on investment equation. And what you see here is the ability to go back and forth here. There is a system at play. And here, what you can see here are the defined objectives, signals, behaviors, and measured results at each relevant range. It's important to note that any complex system requires carefully aligned signals and signal strengths, and then carefully defined behaviors about who is to deal with signals and how they are supposed to deal with those signals. And then in particular, the measured result that we're going for within the relevant range. And those measured results, by the way, are really based upon your performance objectives in that relevant range. And you can see the performance objectives that we have for each range there: operational, tactical, and strategic. So a little bit more on the strategic side of things, because that's gonna be what we're interested here in adaptive S&OP, is we've got a new type of S&OP. It's called the adaptive S&OP. And so the objective, once again, of S&OP is to adapt assets, capabilities, and activities to business projections and direction in the VUCA world. Okay, so that's our objective for adaptive S&OP. It's the strategic component of the DDAE model. Now, here is the basic schema that we have here. On the right-hand side, you can see the market-driven innovation. These are ideas. These are that are coming from leadership, coming from the thought leadership in the company. Adaptive S&OP isn't going to allow you to invent the next iPhone. Okay, so we're assuming that there is some innovation process that is driving the direction of the company. Now, once we have that, we feed it into this schema here. You can see that there are three primary inputs to what we call strategic integrated reconciliation. And by the way, most of you that are familiar with S&OP should be familiar with the term integrated reconciliation. What we've done is we've made it very distinctive to say strategic integrated reconciliation, because this is really, it's the integrated reconciliation at the strategic relevant range. There is another form of integrated reconciliation in the DDA model called tactical integrated reconciliation, otherwise known as demand-driven sales and operations planning. Now, what we do inside of strategic integrated reconciliation, I'll get to in just a second, but then we go back and forth with what's called management business review, which is the interface with leadership and getting them comfortable with the picture and getting a mandate to move forward in certain regards. And then we see a bidirectional arrow to the tactical side of things. So one way we're feeding the emerging strategy, and they are feeding us the capability, performance, and ranges that we can expect to see. So let's go into strategic integrated reconciliation. There are a few aspects of it. There is the adaptive S&OP model and its inputs. There is what we call strategic review. There is what we call new scenario inputs, strategic scenario passes, and then we have our management business review prep. All right, so here what we have is our strategic S&OP model inputs. I hope you understand that we can't condense 320 pages down to 30 minutes here. So I'm going quickly, but I'm kind of showing you the basic elements of adaptive S&OP. So we've got these three inputs. We've got our governance, our market potential, and our strategic capability. So our governance defines the rules, policies, and restrictions involved in the operation of the business within the planned period. Then we've got our market potential, and that defines the market interface and the subsequent revenue potential available within the planned period. And then the strategic capability defines our operational capability to capture the revenue potential within the planned period. And you can see that under the inputs, there are several categories that are listed. Now, when we get to strategic review is about understanding what has happened and looking for variances to things that we're tracking. So particularly things like contribution margin. Our strategic performance objectives are strategic contribution margin, strategic market volume, and strategic working capital. So we're going to be looking at the variances that we're seeing so we can dive down and understand what is behind those variances. Once again, it's all about ranges, right? So we want to understand where we are experiencing things that our capability, for instance, our capability could not range to meet what happened. When we look at our new scenario inputs, there are 3 types of new scenario inputs. There's what we call our market-driven innovation scenarios. So these are our new products, new direction that we put in from leadership. We've got our strategic recommendation scenarios, and that's coming from our tactical side. They might be saying, hey, we need a 3rd shift. We need a new distribution facility. So they're going to put the details behind that scenario. And then we've got external event scenarios. These are events that are imposed on the organization external to us that matter. A pandemic, a trade war, a real war. I mean, these are things that are going to potentially impact our business. So we have to define them and understand how they affect the model. Then we do what we call scenario passes, strategic scenario passes. And here on the left-hand side, you see basically the adaptive S&OP construct or model construct. And then on the right-hand side, you see the sequenced scenario passes that you will go through, starting with what we call our unconstrained pass. Then we go to our constrained pass. Then we go to an exploited capability pass. And then we loop back potentially to new iterations of constrained pass and exploited capability pass. Then we can move on to our augmented capability pass. And then finally, we end with our constrained selection pass. Now, not all of these passes have to occur. Companies can come to a point where they're satisfied that they have a very good handle on what is going to happen or how to deal with certain ranges of possibilities. And they may not have to go to the augmented capability pass or the constrained selection pass. Then when we get to the management business review prep, this is just about preparing to communicate to leadership. It's pretty much that simple. And then when we get to the management business review, this is a meeting or a series of meetings that the SIRT, which is the Strategic Integrated Reconciliation Team, interfaces with the senior management team. And the idea here is that this review is both a beginning and an end to the process in each period. So it begins, it drives to make a decision, and then we come back and review the impact of the decision and look for a new decision. It's facilitated by the SIRT. And it's a great opportunity for the Strategic Integrated Reconciliation Team to learn and to really understand where the business is going, so they get their pulse on where the business is headed, what the vision is with the SMT, and the SMT then also gets some real exposure to the operational reality of the business, and sometimes that's a tough thing for the SMT to keep their handle on, is the operational reality. There are some elements here with the MBR, our past performance review, our threat and risk review, our portfolio review, scenario pass review, and then finally, we have our final recommendations and mandates. Then we have tactical outputs of adaptive S&OP that go or tactical inputs, I should say, with their outputs of adaptive S&OP that go to the tactical range. And you can see here, they're going to be in 4 categories: demand, their budgetary range, your capability definition, and your performance targets. And what we really see here is that we have two adaptive loops. We have one focused on the tactical side of things and another focused on the strategic side of things, and they meet in the middle with what we call demand-driven S&OP, or another word for it is tactical integrated reconciliation. Can a company just turn on adaptive S&OP? The answer is no. There are prerequisites. And you can see the 5 prerequisites that we detail in the book here. One of them is going to be very familiar with you. It's a defined strategic direction. That's always been a prerequisite for any sales and operations planning process. But what you'll see, the other 4 are pretty unique to adaptive sales and operations planning process because it assumes the demand-driven adaptive enterprise model. So you see, you've got leadership has to understand the VUCA world and the complex systems we live in today. There's got to be an understanding and a commitment to flow-based efficiency and what that really means. Okay. There's got to be a flow-based operating model. You can't have flow. You can't manage to flow without an operating model built to manage to flow. And then you've got to have a tactical adaptive loop, the ability to adjust operational capability based upon past performance and emerging strategy. And it really kind of is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Typically, first companies start with a demand-driven operating model. They graduate to the tactical side of things. They get their tactical loop set. Then they're really ready to go to adaptive S&OP. If you want to learn more about it, the book is available throughout the world. So we also have, if you want to really go into more depth, you've got the demand-driven leader, which is our version 3.0, which is being taught right now. And then we also will have a new version of our adaptive S&OP workshop that will follow the book as well. So with that, Caroline, I think I'll turn it back to you. You wanted to say a couple of words, correct?
Thank you very much, Chad. 30 minutes is just short enough to open our appetite to read the book, and there will be more opportunities to discuss these topics. We are going to listen to the question of Damien Brochard from Agilea, one of the first master instructor of DDI. Is going to ask a question for his customer. Damien, can you speak?
Yeah, I think my mic is off. It's okay now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Chad, Carol, and Dick. So in 2018, we were the first affiliate to invest in adaptive S&OP training because at Agilea, we thought the demand-driven transformation needs to start from top management to ease the deployment of a more relevant operating model and support the change management process. Okay, so after 5 implementation, we were right. Okay, and starting with the top management is the right thing. So it's the right thing because it helps people to be prepared to different scenarios of change. Also in 2018, we had the opportunity to spend most of Agilea teams 2 days with Carol and Dick to understand better about history and the issues about S&OP. And I will always remember what Dick said. Dick said, S&OP is a matter of process, people, and tools. And our top manager in industry suffer from a lack of education of what S&OP is about. So my question, how do you intend with this book, because you choose the word S&OP still, so how do you intend with this book to bridge the gap of education to our top management about what S&OP is about in our post-COVID world?
Well, I think, okay, just so I make sure that I understand, your nature of your question is because we still call it S&OP. How are we changing our education to executive management, right? That's really the, okay. Well, I would say this is it's probably not a change in the way that we have, it's not a change in the basic message. I think as we've gone through and written several textbooks, what we see is a better articulation for senior management. But I think also you see a more receptive audience from senior management given the last 2 years. all kinds of things like words like resilience and flexibility are all of a sudden very, very important to executives, and executives are more interested in operations now and supply chain because it's been beating them up for 2 years. So I think there's two things here. It's more articulation. We've had a lot of time to think about this, and to try to show executive leadership, that there's a different way, and why that way is not only valid, but it's based upon very solid assumptions, logic. But I think we have a much more receptive audience right now too.
Thank you, Damien. I'm going now to ask Hervé Belland from Axoma Consultant to ask the second question. Hervé?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
That's okay now? Okay, thanks. Hello, everybody. We have been working on several S&OP implementation, and of course, senior management education is a key to success in that journey. I understood, and we have been working also in the S&OP implementation since years. I understood now that we have 2 levels of S&OP, I guess, and we also know that this process, which is sometimes called integrated business planning process, needs to get several business representatives at the table, finance, HR, and so on and so on. And what would be your recommendation to staff the adaptive S&OP instance, if it exists, and demand-driven S&OP if you have still executive meetings for those both processes?
I think the question is about who does what
Yes.
What teams? Okay. All right. Okay.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. So one of the things that I think you'll see let's start with the strategic integrated reconciliation team. That team is primarily going to be composed of direct reports to C-level. So you may see, these are people that have a very good handle on each function. And they also are the people that know how each function really works relative to what we tell the public or what we tell the board. You also have some analysts involved with that team. On the tactical side, you're going to have people that are probably straight out of operations. You'll have maybe sales and finance and engineering liaisons. But for the most part, they're very operationally focused. They need to be led by somebody who is a good communicator, that also is well respected, both at the top of the organization as well as the operational side of the organization, and also has a very, very good understanding of the operational capability of the organization. We actually detail the types of teams in the book. We take, I think for strategic integrated reconciliation, we take 3 different examples of organizations and, what their job titles would be typically. And we do like a multinational company that has multiple divisions. We do a single entity that's a large entity that's maybe spread across the country. So we do some examples.
Thank you, Hervé. Emric, are you here to ask the third question?
Do you hear me now?
Yes, very well. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for this introduction to the whole DDI team. And congrats for this new book. It will be very helpful. My question is around DD-S&OP and financials. In the past, we had a lot of clients who were much more comfortable to manage their S&OP cycle based on quantities, and then they would add, as you introduced, Chad, a financial reporting to it. My question is whether in DD S&OP now you have some proposal and, let's say, recommendation to better integrate finance straight into S&OP from the start. So how would we better integrate financial numbers, and maybe around, I think, what you call the tactical contribution margin, especially? How would you suggest we do that?
Well, I think there's two things. There's tactical contribution margin and there's strategic contribution margin, but they're of the same root, and that is, and whenever we're talking about putting financials into S&OP activity, we should be putting them in a way that reconciles to cash. It really is that simple. Why? Because cash is operationally focused. Cost is not. All right. Cost is there for reporting attributes. So everything that you see in the book from a financial perspective, and we spend quite a bit of time on it, is all done from a cash reconciliation point. We also have a very unique take on working capital as well, with a brand new metric that we're really excited about, that then that gives us a lot better pulse on what working capital, how you truly measure working capital in the strategic range.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much. I'm going now to ask Anaïs from Sitwell. As soon as I find her. Yes, here. Anaïs, can you speak?
Yes, do you hear me?
Yes, very well. Thank you, Anaïs. Your turn.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm really happy to be here, and thank you to DDI and to Caroline for organizing this event. I really like what you've built around adaptive S&OP and the strategic integrated reconciliation and the new KPIs. I think it gives great value to what's today the S&OP. We have extensive experience in helping people go through DDOM, DDS&OP, and IBP and S&OP, and I guess I have a twofold question for you guys, especially considering what would be a multinational company and not a small company. Usually when we try to switch to S&OP or IBP, very well-oriented business leadership team have good views of what should be the S&OP, but then end up caught in a very technical project around data, around creating multiple scenarios, and they kind of lose the vision of what S&OP should be about. And considering there are two loops, today, do you advise on having one full integrated IT system that should manage the two loops, or could it be different systems? And the other part of my question is, how do we make sure that people don't drown in the sea of data to do everything that's written here, and drown in the creativeness of the marketing and tactical team that will create a lot of scenarios if they are not well oriented? Should it start with systemic thinking, for instance?
Okay, so the first question, I think I might have forgotten what the first question was because I was listening to the second question. The first question was, the systems. I think that the only answer I have is I think it depends. I mean, do you have a system? Do you own a system that's capable of giving you everything you need from a relevant information perspective on the operational, relevant, and strategic ranges? You may not be able to have that in one system. Should you aspire to that? I think so. I absolutely believe that. But I think in reality, it may not be that easy. The second question was about what something that you had to do with systemic thinking, how to start it.
How to not have people create dozens of scenarios and managers unable to choose.
Okay, well, I think in my opinion, it starts with education. I mean, if people don't understand what the objective is that they're driving to, and we measure them on number of scenarios done instead of the appropriateness of the scenario, then we're in trouble. When we are doing scenarios, we have to have an objective in mind as to when is enough, and that is the idea of the strategic scenario passes and the sequence in which we go through those scenario passes. Don't keep making it perfect. It's never going to be perfect. What it needs to be is good enough to where the SIRT and the SMT are comfortable in moving forward. I mean, everybody knows that what we're doing in the strategic relevant range is an estimation of what will happen and what we can probably do based upon what will happen, what we think will happen. Both of those parameters are going to be constantly changing around thousands of different variables. So the key is then to understand, to embrace that, and then manage the variances, and see the variances and understand why the variances occur.
Okay, well, thanks. That's very interesting.
Thank you very much, Anaïs. I'm going now to ask Bernard Millian from DDTech. DDTech is the first historically software that supported that methodology. Bernard, can you speak?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's fine now.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Chad, Carol, and Dick for the book and for this event. I would have a quick question. In fact, Daemon Driven is still today mainly known for DDMRP, which is about order generation and inventory buffers. But make to order or engineer to order companies are more about time and capacity management than inventory. How would you summarize the distinct traits of adaptive S&OP in those make to order, engineering to order environments, and what team-driven approaches bring to the table in those environments?
Well, I'd say there really aren't distinctive traits in the adaptive S&OP side of things. The distinctive traits occur in the operational capability and the approach to the operational model. I mean, make to order and engineer to order companies still care about cash, right? They're still driving return on investment. And they still have governance inputs. They still have strategic capability inputs, and they still have market volume inputs. So I don't think there's big distinctions on the adaptive S&OP side. I think all the distinctions go to the operational design side of things, particularly the deployment of time capacity buffers and detailed scheduling of resources to accomplish activity after any decoupling points that you might be able to have. I mean, MTO and ETO companies still use decoupling point buffers, but it's typically going to be low in their product structure. So then they've got to figure out how to deal with the variability in operations and in the market past those decoupling points. So I think most of the distinctions are in the operational model. And of course, then if there are distinctions in the operational model, then there are going to be some distinctions in the tactical side, the tactical adaptive loop. But I don't see it. I don't see big distinctions in the adaptive S&OP process.
Thank you, Chad.
Thank you. The last question will be for Andrea Valbert from PMI Germany, our German partner. Andrea, can you speak?
Thank you, Caroline. Yeah, thank you to Chad and Carol and Dick for the book. It's very helpful for us too. I have a question for you about artificial intelligence and digital twin, because some leaders nowadays, also our customers, think that the S&OP process is outdated and could be replaced by digitalization. And concepts of AI, digital twin, and so on become more and more important. How has this been taken care in the book, if it has been taken care? And is this something you are also considering?
Well, I think in the book, we left a lot of things open to how certain things can be accomplished. And I'll say this, though, certainly at the strategic level of a company, I don't think there's any excuse not to think. Okay, so we should always be, going through a process by which we understand our system, we understand the complexities of it, and we understand the implications of deployment of certain technologies. I think we're still a fair ways away from hitting the button and just sitting back on cruise control. With that said, I think that there's a lot of things that can be routinized. And, if you think about what the real objective of technology is, certainly software. It's to bring routinization. And now that can be good and bad. If you routinize the wrong behavior, it's a disaster. It's a total disaster. If you routinize the right behavior, then things fly well. The key determinant here is, can we determine what is the right and the wrong behavior to routinize? And from my perspective, that's all right here. It's up to us to determine what is the appropriate information at different levels of our organization. That's the way we wrote the book anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of you. We are very well on time, so I'm going to ask a question to Carol and Chad. What are the new countries that are adopting the DDAE right now? The vocabulary has been translated in many different languages. Can you give us some news about the exposure of the methodology around the world?
Sure. I think one of the things we're very excited about is going into China. So we have our first demand-driven planner program translated into Chinese, and it's been delivered now. We've translated the dictionary, and there will be book translations coming in Chinese as well. So I think that that's a very exciting time for us. It's no secret that China is a big player in the global market. So I think that there's a lot of potential there to see what demand-driven can do. And hopefully, I think, it's probably a good thing for a lot of supply chains out there.
Thank you very much. Christophe Lennart, Master Instructor, DDI Master Instructor, is next to me and is pushing me to ask a question.
Hello, Carol, Chad, and Dick. Thanks for this great presentation into the book and into the approach. The question that I would like to ask you comes back to one of the main struggles that companies are facing in the conventional S&OP already. And this is the question, well, how can we translate between monetary terms and capacity terms? Because at the end of the day, they need to be reconciled. And what new insights can we see here in this new framework towards that challenge?
I'm not sure I totally understand the question, the reconciliation between capability and financial.
Finance and top management, they are interested in euros, dollars, or whatever. Mm-hmm. But unless we are in the business of printing banknotes, operations are not making these kinds of things. They make bottles, they make other
Right.
products. They make cars, etc.
See, I do liken it to printing money because, and this goes back to the cash reconciliation. Your assets do not exist simply to produce things indiscriminately. Your assets exist to produce things that people will pay you for, that you can exchange for real money. That's why we drive everything to cash velocity. All right. It's what did you have to put in to cash versus what did the market actually pay you for what you produced. We've all seen it. We've all seen the games that people play with cost, because cost doesn't reconcile to cash. We can appear to do good things and do just the opposite. All right. So I really do view it as printing money. That's why we reconcile to cash. You don't just make things to occupy activity and store them. All right. You know, I once had a company, large company, and we would always ask, we'd go down to the floor and ask people, why are you making this? Why are you making this batch, this size of batch? There's no order for it. And they had a joke. They say, well, making things just feels good. That's not why we exist. That's not why our operational assets exist. Our operational assets exist to get paid for. All right. So I do view it as printing money.
Thank you.
Okay, we're getting to the end of this webinar. Again, our appetite is wide open to read the book. We should be able to read it soon in France. For the members of the association, you will get it at a discounted price. Merci aux adhérents français et à nos partenaires pour leur soutien toutes ces années. C'est grâce à vous que nous sommes ensemble aujourd'hui. Now you are all invited to our next webinars. French-speaking participant or English-speaking participant. We will introduce mastermind groups about DDAE, S&OP, and academy supply chain. And we will we'll be able to continue that conversation with pioneers, company members of RFR SCM. Now, Carol, we are going to go to a private mastermind organized by Visconti partners, executive coaches. Some of you invited their CEOs right away to discuss with Carol, Chad, and Dick, and several CEOs and coaches who already experienced S&OP. Congratulations, this is very clever. We'll have other opportunities to speak directly to CEOs. Thanks to all of you. Thank you. Carol, would you like to say something?
I just want to thank everybody for your attendance, and we've tried to answer as many questions that were texted in, and we will follow up with those afterwards. But we appreciate that AFR SCM has again taken the lead. We were very pleased that DDMRP launched in Europe through at the time was Fapics, and we'd like to thank Caroline for her leadership and her energy in this demand-driven community. So thank you very much, and we look forward to those great questions.
Thank you all. Bye-bye, see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
In a French restaurant, I hope.
Bye.
Carol.
That would be nice.